Hey! So many months ago, I found this YouTube channel, Matt Rose, and he does a lot of different types of video, but some of them revolve around a fun X or Y type format. For example, we have song lyrics or Xbox Live message insult, or classic video game or urban dictionary term, or child quote or celebrity tweet. And I thought, hey, with AI I could probably make something similar, where we ask if something is a real name of something or someone making it up. And by someone, in this case, I meant an AI. That way I could play this game without needing any of my own creativity. And it would be really interesting to see how well we can tell these apart. Then it came to choosing what I would be generating, and I decided to go with English Wikipedia article titles, because the answer to the question, is this a Wikipedia article, tends to be the same answer to the question, is this a thing that exists and is at least somewhat notable? Well, it's not true in every case, and that sort of edge case actually makes for some interesting guesses, but we'll get to that in a bit. So I decided I'd train GPT-2 on Wikipedia article titles and try to make a game out of that, and I think it succeeded very well. Let's take a look. So the first step was fine-tuning GPT-2 on Wikipedia articles. For those who don't know, GPT-2 is a very powerful natural language AI made for text generation, and it's quite good at sounding coherent, even when it says utter nonsense. That's because it works entirely by analyzing word frequency and basically guessing, given these words, which one comes next. When GPT-2 came out, it wasn't introducing any new methods to natural language processing. It was just doing the same thing, but more. But anyways, how did I get GPT-2 to work specifically to generate Wikipedia article titles? Well, that's where we get to fine-tuning. Basically, you can give GPT-2 your own dataset, and it will use what it already knows about the English language to continue to train and generate text like the text that you gave it. I'll put a link in the description to the exact tutorial I found to do this if you want to try it on your own. But to do this, I needed to first get a huge list of Wikipedia article titles to train off of, which was rather straightforward. It just meant scouring Wikipedia and Wikidata until I could find somewhere they stored a list of all titles. Another reason I chose Wikipedia for this project was because I know it's very open and transparent. Pretty much any data and information they have is open not just to the public, but also via APIs. So once that was done, I left my computer for a few hours for it to train on the Wikipedia article titles, and after I felt it had gotten fairly far, I told it to generate a bunch of articles. After that, I had a very long list of generated Wikipedia article titles. And you may think that from there, all I had to do was clean it up a bit, remove any weird formatting stuff, and then start the game UI. But there was more to be done. I had to sanitize these fake articles, filtering out things that I didn't want in the final product. This involved several different steps. Firstly, and most importantly, these articles weren't necessarily fake. The AI was trying to generate texts like the text that I gave it, and the text that most matches the text I gave it is, well, the exact text that I gave it. So the first thing my sanitation script had to do was go back through the fakes and check each one of the articles to see if it was a real Wikipedia article, which I did by using the Wikipedia API and trying to get data on all the articles with corresponding names. Next, some articles were simply not fun to guess. Firstly, articles that were just one word long, usually seeming to be in some foreign language, were not fun to guess. Unless you speak a huge number of different languages, it's not very engaging to see a bunch of symbols and have to answer, is this a thing in some other country? Because the answer is pretty much always, I don't know, I have no information on what this thing might even be. So I got my script to remove any article title that was only one word long. Another set of articles that weren't fun to guess were names. Typically, they just had you asking a question, is there any somewhat notable person who has this name? And unless you have an index of every politician, celebrity, and sports player in the entire world, that's not a sort of question anyone can really answer. So I started trying to filter out names, but that wasn't an easy task. The first thing I knew was that names were 2 words long, a first and a last. Except some people had middle names, though most Wikipedia article titles have middle initials instead. Also, how do I differentiate names from other 2-word articles? My solution was as follows. 1. Check if the article is 2 or 3 words long. If it's 3 words long, check if the middle word is simply a single character, or a single character followed by a dot. If neither of the above apply, it's not a name. Keep it. Otherwise, treat the first and third words as a 2-word article title and proceed to step 2. Step 2. Check both words against a database of first names and surnames, and also check them against an English dictionary. If both words either are in the database or aren't in the dictionary, consider it a name, and scrap it. This ended up getting rid of most of the names, which I decided to keep in a separate file for safekeeping, in case I ever want to make another game that includes large numbers of AI-generated names, that or I just need names to use in my D&D campaign. But these weren't all the names. It just filtered out a good number of them, and I decided to leave it there. The final annoying set of articles were ones like The Invasion, 1925 film. This is not a Wikipedia article, but The Invasion film is. This is just annoying, because the question players will ask themselves is there a film called The Invasion? And not, did a film called The Invasion, which I already haven't heard of, come out specifically in 1925? It would be a legitimate question if The Invasion weren't a film at all, but the numbers just make the game more annoying, like a little kid saying he won because of a slight technicality in the wording of your answer to his question. So what I did for this was, well, rather simple. If the article had numbers in it, my script queried Wikipedia for the article name stripped of those numbers. If there was a result, then I removed it. Otherwise, both the article and the numbers stayed. Once all that was done, and we'd removed all the bad articles, I had a list of about 10,000 fake article titles. I made a quick console Python script to gather a bunch of real articles from Wikipedia, and have it give me either one of those or a fake article title, and have me guess if it was real, telling me if I was right every time. I tested this with family and friends, and it generally went over really well. It was an interesting exercise, and people got very into guessing what was and wasn't real. And after all that, well, I started college and completely forgot the project existed for around 4 months. But when January started and I was looking for smaller projects to do, I realized this was still lying around on my computer, and that I could make it into a fun little web game in JavaScript, so that's what I did. One of the main reasons I wanted to make this into a web game was so that I could link to each Wikipedia article after guessing. So if you thought something was fake but it turned out to be real, you could click the link and visit the Wikipedia page to see it for yourself. Also, since the Wikipedia API was so easy to use, I had the game fetch a brief description of the item and displayed that as well. So even without clicking the link, you can learn that, for example, the Cucanan River is part of the Orinoco Basin in Venezuela. Also, when testing this with friends, I had begun researching all the titles that didn't exist, seeing what similar things did. Sometimes they yielded no results, but sometimes you'd find in the search results some very similar items. So I used the Wikipedia API to get the game to do the same thing. It queries Wikipedia's search function for fake articles, and if it runs into any results, it tells you, for example, that although Lowe's, Alabama was AI generated, Lower Alabama is a real Wikipedia article. Once I did that, I wanted to make the game a little more interesting than just guessing yes or no and being told if you're right after each one. So I added 2 new modes. The original still exists as free play, but now there are 2 more challenging options, Challenge Mode and Speedrun. In Challenge Mode, you start with 3 lives. If you get an answer wrong, you lose a life, and every 5th guess, you gain a life. Your goal is to get as far as possible before losing all your lives. In Speedrun Mode, you get 1 point for every correct answer and lose 1 point for every incorrect answer. You have 60 seconds total to get as high a score as you can, so you have to process quickly and develop an intuition for what is and isn't real. So after all this was done, I played and wrote down some of the more interesting fake articles that were generated, so here are some interesting ones. The Magicians film is not a real Wikipedia article, but Magicians, Magician, and The Magician are all titles of films. Some of them are titles of multiple films, actually. There's a TV series called The Magicians, there's a novel called The Magicians, but there is no Wikipedia article on a film titled The Magicians, just every single title adjacent to it. The game often tests your knowledge of both politics and multiplication. For example, to know that 1962 United States presidential election in Colorado is fake, you have to know that US presidential elections only happen on years that are multiples of 4, and that 1962 is not a multiple of 4. There's some funny lists that are either way too general or way too specific to be real. They're not difficult, but they're funny. Here are a few. List of non-game related topics. List of films for boys. List of places in the Pacific Northwest. List of people from the United States and the Bahamas. List of people from the United States named after the United States Virgin Islands. List of Addlesdale High School football players. List of places in the Republic of Ireland, disambiguation. List of people from Cambodia. List of places in the United Kingdom by popular vote. List of survivors of the 1997 World Athletics Championships. That was a rough year. Though names were mostly removed, I intentionally left in names that included additional context. For example, Trey Williams, footballer. Because this isn't asking, is there any notable person named Trey Williams, but specifically, is there a well-known footballer named Trey Williams? And is Trey Williams a name that I would expect a footballer has? Which to me is a much more interesting question. There's an article in there that simply reads July 24th, 2014, and honestly I find it a little bit intimidating. What happened then? Anyway, given all that, try this game out for yourself if you haven't already. A link to it is in the description. Let me know if you come across anything interesting. Since all my filtering was automatic, there's plenty that I haven't seen. Anyway, see you next time for I don't know what yet, but make sure to subscribe and stick around. There'll be something.